which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First order of business is to approve the agenda.
So move. Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, motion carried. And we need to approve the minutes of the last meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes. I did find a little typo and I notified Michelle about it to correct it ahead of time, so it's all taken care of. You probably all caught it.
Yeah.
No.
No, it's okay. I make a motion to approve them.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the minutes. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, motion carried. Is there anyone who wishes to make an opening public comment this evening? Okay. We'll go right into appointments then. Mr. Locker.
Evening, Commissioners. Here to discuss proposed amendments to the zoning ordinance. You have some hefty packets that have the text that's being proposed contained. Your packets had two sets of changes. The first set of changes was the changes initiated by the county staff and proposed to the planning commission. And the second packet shows those changes having been accepted and then additional changes that the planning commission proposed using the staff proposal as a baseline. Some slight changes, not a lot of significant changes from the initial proposal. The proposed amendments, as I said, were initiated by the county and they serve to maintain compliance with state and federal floodplain standards and state shoreline standards. The Planning Commission held a public hearing to consider this language and unanimously recommended the amendment. The floodplain amendments specifically are required in order for the county's continued participation in the National Flood Insurance Program and can affect the dispersal of disaster recovery dollars. As of today, there are 33 National Flood Insurance policies in the county. These policies must be renewed periodically, and the county's continued participation in the program makes those renewals possible. Without that, they would need to find a product out in the private marketplace. There are likely many more structures that are located in flood-prone areas that are not currently insured, as there's no requirement that you carry that insurance, but oftentimes if there's a mortgage involved, the requirement will be that there's an insurance policy in place. So with that in mind, there's the potential for additional benefit to these other structures in the future if title on those properties were ever to change that involve a mortgage. They might need to avail themselves of such a policy. The new flood mapping is more accurate than the status quo. The current effective maps were created in 1982, and today's technology is much more sophisticated. The floodplain is being reduced in many places without having done a comprehensive scientific analysis. It's my impression that the overall effect of the map updates will be a reduction in the total area included in the flood hazard zone. And I'm also aware of several landowners that are awaiting the updates because their properties will be removed and they will no longer be required to maintain that insurance. The shoreline rules are a state mandate, and the proposed amendments serve to incorporate the most current applicable statutes and rules. The proposed language is also an improvement in terms of ease of access and clarity, with the shoreline language working in concert with the proposed floodline language. There are other minor changes proposed in various sections of the ordinance. These changes are grammatical, stylistic, or format changes, and are simply part of routine maintenance of an ordinance. These proposed amendments are compatible with the comprehensive plan, which calls for the adoption of state standards for natural resources, as well as the protection of shoreline and floodplains. As I said, we held a public hearing on November 1st, and this public hearing was advertised in the paper record on October 17th, and we also sent notifications to all the cities and townships in the county earlier than that 17th advertisement.
Did you get any comments back at the public hearings at all?
We didn't have any members of the public in attendance at the public hearing.
Okay.
We did get some comments from the DNR after they approved our initial draft
Okay,
that I brought to the planning commission, and in large part that represents the changes between what was proposed to them and what they're proposing to you. Since the planning commission made a recommendation, I did have a member of the public bring to my attention some formatting issues within the ordinance that I believe you could correct this evening, and I will review with you that there's no substantive change.
kind of the numbering situation a little bit?
This is just some spaces that were missing and some text that was not bolded.
Okay,
But it would make it consistent with the overall format of the document.
okay.
So I'm prepared to answer questions on any of the amendments. I can bring up the language on the monitors. I could simply cover the formatting changes that I'm proposing as well, really however the board wishes to proceed.
I think most of it was included in our packet last week.
Yeah,
I'd be satisfied with the format changes.
Okay. These are all in the adult use section of the ordinance, which I've not used to date since my coming to the county, and I don't know we've ever issued a permit under, but it exists nonetheless. And we are, I guess I could just cover some spaces, or I could go into the specifics of every space we're inserting in every text we're bolting, or I could simply say we're inserting some spaces between definitions in the definition section of this ordinance, and we are bolding some terms that are defined in this ordinance.
yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Those are the additional corrections.
Yeah.
Amendment of the ordinance requires a 4/5 vote.
Right.
I guess if there are no questions, I would urge a motion from a member.
I'll make a motion to approve the zoning ordinance amendments as presented.
I'll second the motion.
We've had a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Thank you.
Motion carried.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you, Aaron. It should be noted that this ordinance covers 300 and how many pages? Or isn't it quite that many?
Well,
It's substantial.
your versions were longer than it will ultimately be existing, because it showed all the deleted text as well as all the proposed text. So now
Okay.
all the text that was struck in will no longer be there. So you'll be about 300 pages, I believe.
Yeah.
In terms of the updates, I do need a signature from the chair.
Yep.
Perhaps I could get that from you sometime tomorrow, if possible. I would travel in order to do so.
Oh, you don't want to wait until we're done tonight?
If necessary, I would do that.
I'll be in town sometime tomorrow.
Okay, wonderful, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Podozensky is next.
This is your expertise.
Good evening, Commissioners.
Evening.
So 3 weeks ago, I was in to talk about recommending the purchase of Hybe culvert inspection vehicle. It was tabled at that time, told to come back here in a couple weeks. So I'm bringing that back up today to help answer any questions you have or to seek a motion.
You were checking to see if Fillmore County might be interested in going with us on this?
So Fillmore County would be willing to have us share theirs, use theirs as needed. We could go along with that option. It does take some time and effort to move that from one county to another. Just the drive over and back is 2 hours each time, and you're going to be making that trip along with the vehicle. So, you know, there's instances where we feel we'll use this for 2-3 weeks straight every day, and then there's periods throughout the year where we might use it, you know, once or twice a month. During that period when we're using it on a regular basis, you know, getting their unit using it for a couple weeks, you know, as long as they don't need it, that would work good for us. When we have those, you know, day here, day there, when we have some problem that shows up that we need to figure out, you know, what is causing it, you know, how often is that going to occur? You know, is it cost effective to do that? You know, at 2 hours per time, when you factor in the mileage and the labor, it doesn't take very many times where the initial savings is used up in cost efficiencies. So, whichever route the board wants to go, I can make work.
My initial thought, I guess, for the expense of what this is, I don't know personally, as far as sharing with the county, another county.
It's not that expensive, you're saying?
Yeah, and you know, I know like bigger, more expensive purchases, you buy a machine that's 50 grand that gets used seldom. Yeah, you know, something. You know, I guess to me, for the price of this expense.
And it is in your budget. What was the price again?
It's roughly $1,200 to $1,500. I've seen kind of
So-
various prices in that range.
And then I just
Yeah,
don't want to have an
you
issue
can-
where somebody breaks it or does something, and then it's, oh, well, you broke it. Now we got to fix. You know,
Yeah.
if it was more expensive, I'd maybe be, you know, have more of an issue. But I don't know. I think it's just kind of. To me, I'm fine with it.
Yeah. Fine.
Yeah. I'll move that to authorize the purchase.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
That's all you have this evening.
That's all I have. I'll stick around for the public hearing at 6:30. If you have any questions at that time, I can try to
Okay.
answer that along with.
Very good.
Or-
Carol.
Yes.
Finance update. My goodness. Instead of 15 minutes, you have 45 minutes.
Don't tell her that, Fred.
Well, I mean, she can do math.
I hope so.
I can, but gosh, I don't think it's really all that interesting that you'd want to spend that much time right here. We have our reports for through the end of October. We have most departments coming in where they need to be in terms of expenditures. The revenues for like the county revenue fund is really only at 64%, but that's because our settlement comes in November, which is a majority of our funding for that. We do have a couple things that came up that may need to be purchased before the end of the year, and looking at the different budgets where they are to see if it can actually be worked through. They're not large purchases, but just since it is towards the end of the year and everyone's getting closer to having their budget dollars spent, just to make sure that it doesn't create any issues. They're each less than $9,000, I believe. In that case, there might be a bigger one bigger item, but that'll be presented.
Where does the
phone thing fall again?
The phone thing was paid from the, there is an account that's just called the telephone system, and that's in the general, general government, the 01003,
Okay.
in the projects account, which is the capital expenditure money that is designated from the MCIT insurance refund. And that for this year was close to $95,000. So the telephone system will be allocated from that money, which still leaves a little bit left in there, but there might have been one other thing. Oh, in the zoning and solid waste department, the porta potties and the maintenance for this year will be also paid from there.
There was one large expense to Bolton and Mink. What was that for? Do you
Oh,
remember?
that's for the airport deal, wasn't it?
Right.
Bolton and Maine.
Oh, that's right.
Bolton and
Okay.
Mink, that's the
Okay.
airport.
I forgot about that, yeah.
Mhm. Yes. And also in looking, since this is one of the months where we would have to depend on having that fund balance, and we typically maintain 50% of our current year levy, in looking at like May and November, which are the months that are really affected by that, we could actually have a lower number. It's recommended to have between 45 and 60%. We typically maintain the 50%, but that could actually go down to the 45, and we would still be okay in what we maintain in our fund balance.
As far as the auditor and stuff like that.
Right. Well,
The-
just for our operations.
Oh, operations,
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah, to make sure that we're not running out of money in those months where we haven't gotten the majority of our income in.
Mhm.
Mhm. We could, our policy really just says the 45 to 60%, so I don't need to know that there's a need to change that, but to actually just be aware that the 45% is sufficient.
And that's actually our cash flow to cover.
Right. To cover our cash flow.
Yeah.
Mhm. So, did anyone see anything that?
No, I noticed that Bolton Mink, and I forgot about the airport thing.
Mhm.
And I also had talked to Jeff about the fact that EMS were holding off on that. The 11 counties are holding off on it, still
Right.
checking on that kind of
Yes, and I had
situation.
emailed out the appropriation information.
Yes, thank you.
Based on who we actually
Yes.
give the money to, and
If I hear anything, I'll let both of you know. But
okay.
we don't meet till January again, so I'm good that way.
Okay. Do we simply go ahead with action items and consent agenda then?
Right.
Until, okay. Action items, approve claims, human service and license center disbursements.
I'll make a motion to approve the claims.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carried. Memorandum of agreement with the University of Minnesota for extension program. And Teresa,
I'll make a motion. We
you-
worked with Extension to work on that memorandum. It's due actually, I think, the end of December, but the sooner we can get it on the books that we approved our memorandum of understanding.
Yeah.
So I'll make a motion to approve the agreement with the state of Minnesota.
the university,
University.
not the state, the university.
Yes, state
Well, the state would dearly love to completely take over the university, but
Oh,
let's
yes, you're
let's
exact-
not start that.
No,
yeah.
good.
We need a second on that.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion on that? We were both at the meeting when this was talked about and worked on, and I don't have any problem with it anywhere, unless one of you gentlemen sees something that
And I
might
think
be.
Jeff said that Attorney Yant looked at the.
Yes,
And it's a 3-year contract,
yeah.
so.
I really don't think hardly anything changed since the last one,
No, well,
if anything. So, okay. Motion for approval has been made. All those in favor, aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carried. Consent agenda. Administrator actions.
All right. Only personnel administration action this time is to amend the hiring status of Mr. Robert Ott from probationary to regular status, effective 4 December 2018 on his anniversary.
Okay.
And then I'll let you take action on that first, and then I have a couple things to talk, or one thing to talk about.
Oh, okay. We need a motion then. Yeah.
Jeff, did we get copies of this in our packet?
No, I didn't get a chance to put that in the packet, but I will send a copy of it to you if you like. Yep.
And where does Mr. Ott work?
This works for Brian,
Oh,
Highway
okay.
Department.
He's the sign specialist, correct?
Okay. I'll make a motion to approve the status of Mr. Ott.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carried. And you have something else?
Yes, sent a copy of it via email to you earlier today, but we just received today the decision and award of arbitration for the LELS unit number 60, our jailer dispatcher unit. And nice long decision. I'm still working my way through the whole packet, but the bottom line is that the arbitrator did confirm the county's position on a 3-year contract, and then no changes to the overtime verbiage and no changes to the court cancellation verbiage that the union had requested. And then the bottom line is the wages, and the arbitrator specified that for 2018 there would be a 2.75% wage increase, and for 2019 a 2.5%, and for 2020, the third year, the 2.25%, and no market increase across the years. So that's where that came in with LELS number 60.
That's reasonable.
Yeah. Good. Jeff, do you know where we're at in terms of zoning office, looking for another position there?
Yes, the position description is being reviewed and reclassified. So I think we're close to having that.
Okay.
I was gonna ask the same question, Jack, because I did get a call about sewer inspections and stuff are running behind.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
good. So do you need a motion on that union contract?
No,
I'm
that's
not-
just information for the board.
Hmm?
That's just information at this point. Yep.
Okay.
Okay. 2018 annual meeting. Do you have anything else, Jeff?
No, that's all I have.
Yeah,
for the group.
okay. 2018 annual meeting announcement and notice of board election from MCIT. We've got that. We don't need to, nothing needed there.
Have we ever had a delegate to that?
I thought you were the delegate, weren't you, Jack?
I've never gone to it,
Okay.
if I am. I mean,
I sort of remember that I might have been the delegate to that, and because of too many music activities in this time of the year, I can't go up there at all.
well, let me
So
look.
I'm out of it.
Okay, I think Fred is probably right, he was
Yeah.
the, and you
Yeah.
were the alternate, Jack.
Okay. I mean, I can go, it coincides with,
Yeah,
The meeting,
it's right there.
4:00 or something.
Okay.
like that, right?
Yeah.
I'll plan on going to it then.
Okay.
All right.
Commissioner reports and comments. Teresa may start if she'd like.
I didn't have any, well, I was here for counting ballots yesterday for, we had two precincts in the county that needed to be
The post-election equipment review was held.
post-election.
And yes, we did select 2 precincts.
Yes, and so being an election judge, I got to do that. But it wasn't for La Crescent Township, it was for, Houston, actually. And that was just the state and federal offices, 4 offices. Then, in the afternoon, Monday, I had a meeting with, La Crescent Library, Winona Commissioner Warren, and about the Selco contract, because they're working on their appropriations and the new formulas for distribution. And it was actually very good because Winona did not realize that Selco is just a pass-through. They don't get any money. Whatever we appropriate for Selco goes to Selco. They distribute it by a formula. So they're working on redoing their formulas based on per capita. So evidently La Crescent gets a lot of people from Winona stopping at the La Crescent Library because it's a pass-through to La Crosse. Getting books and checking it out, so it was kind of interesting. It's enlightening how they figure all that out, but it's their problem to figure out the distribution, not ours. So, anyway, that was my 2 meetings.
Did they mention that my wife paid her fine yesterday?
Oh, did
Okay.
And I ordered 2 books and they both came in now. There's no way I can read 2 books in 2 weeks. Big books. Anyway, those were my only 2 things.
Me? I've only got 2 things as well. One of them is just a clarification. Speaking of election stuff, we had in my district, your commissioner-elect had put out that the administrator is costing the county $150,000 a year. Just for clarification, that is not true. It's 109, and he is taking benefits, military benefits, through the government. So, just wanted the public to know that that number was not accurate. Just to set the record straight, that it's only 109. The other thing is, when going forward, I had some information that I found that I just thought for. I know, Fred, you've been doing a lot of stuff with the highway department, the building and construction
Working
stuff.
on it.
And this was just some information that I had gathered a long time ago that I had brought forward, and it kind of went nowhere years ago. And I think it's extremely important to have in somebody's hands, just to, when going forward, to have it as reference material. And there's just a difference on building construction materials and prices and pros and cons to the different construction material. So I'm going to give this to you since you've been kind of the one heading that up. But I just
Thank
thought
you.
it's something that keep in the back of your head, just reference material only, really,
Yeah. Yeah.
But I thought it was important enough that you should have on file. So
Appreciate that.
you bet. Other than that, that's it.
Okay. Last night I had a 2.5-hour meeting for Hiawatha Valley Mental Health, which is about an hour and a half more than normal, but there are a lot of changes going on, and we met in the new building on Sarnia, which used to be Winona Health. The 2 buildings that were previously housing different programs for Hiawatha Valley have been sold, so that's a good thing. And I met with John Puglisa today just to go over exactly how much we use Hiawatha Valley, and it's substantial. So it's a good thing that the programs and facilities are doing well or are improving, I guess I would say. And so that was an interesting and productive meeting. Today we had negotiations with the 49ers, and Jeff and Tess and I have some things to review following that, and we'll also be scheduling a time with the full board to review some of that and make some decisions. Following that, Fred and I met with Jeff and talked about the county maintenance building, and again we are moving, I would say.
I think so.
Yeah.
Of course, I've thought so before
Yeah.
and said that, and then it has gone poof, and so
Yeah.
we'll hope we have better luck this
Yeah,
time.
I think we have some momentum here. I think that's it.
Okay, I had a couple of meetings since the last one. The Southeast Minnesota water, I can't remember the exact initials, but anyway, the water, having to do with water in the 11 county southeastern Minnesota area, met yesterday at Orinoco, and I think that they have, it's been reorganized with this one watershed, one plan thing, why the organizational structure has been changed some, but I think it's going pretty well right now. They've gotten their act together on the priorities quite well, and that I hadn't seen that before, and I'm really glad to see that. And they are emphasizing more civic engagement than they were. The feeling previously had been that the state was kind of running the thing, and people didn't have much to say about it, and they've heard that, and they're trying to make some changes. We have a couple of things here that were talked about there that I have to get to local people and find out what's going on, because I didn't know. The Riceford Creek is one of them. In any event, as near as I can tell at that level, because of the changes that have come about because of the one watershed, one plan concept, funding is really going quite well in the water-related activities.
From the state or federal? Or?
Basically state.
Okay.
That one watershed, one plan thing is pretty much a state thing. We were concerned, I think it was talked about here at the time that Dana talked about the one watershed, one plan concept. I'm sure it was talked about here, and we talked about it again yesterday. Is it going to be a problem of just adding another level of government to this whole thing that's going to wind up costing us more and we get less out of it? The short answer is no. They're not adding any levels of government, and they are trying very hard to get much more input. Well, as I said, they talked about civic involvement, and they also are emphasizing farmer-led groups as far as the ag part of the water purification and all that sort of thing is concerned, which is a little bit different than it was a few years ago. So I'm very glad to see that. I've got a meeting.
Is this going to
Mo-
cost the county anything at this point? No.
Not any additional money is being asked for from the county at this point.
Okay.
And the balance sheet, the proposed projects as compared with the available money looks pretty good.
Good.
There's actually a little bit more money there than is actually going to be needed. That's what it says now. Now, what it says when it comes down and you start figuring out how many dollars an hour that bulldozer costs, yeah, okay, but at least it won't be terribly in arrears with what needs to be done. Obviously, you're not going to get everything done in 6 months. You know, it's a many-year type of thing, and that's realistically that's what I'm looking at. I have a meeting next Monday in Preston for the One Watershed, One Plan group. I got some information from them today, and I've looked through it briefly, and I think I can say the same thing there, that because of the One Watershed, One Plan, we really are looking pretty good financially based on the projects that are proposed for the year as opposed to the money that's there to get them done.
Good.
So I think that's okay. I had one other meeting that I can report on very briefly, and I need to find, here it is. I was at the annual Agricultural Society meeting on Sunday evening, and the financial report says that the net, oh dear, it's on the other page, there it is, the net income of the Agricultural Society for the last year is $48,933.49.
Good for them.
Now, the amazing part of that, to me, and I'm sure we've all heard rumors of a misunderstanding about the terms of a contract and the resultant problems for that concert on Thursday night. And when you look at the annual report, there we go, concert income was something around 11.2, and concert expenses got to be 54.1. So they actually, according to the financials, they lost about 43 on that concert, but they still show a net income of 48 for the last year. So that's where that's at.
Well, especially after the bad year they had last year with all the rain and storms and.
Yeah,
So
yeah, that was a very bad year for those folks. I'm really glad to see that this looks a bit better.
Do they have a pretty active group?
Is it?
at 6:30.
I thought it was 6:30. Sorry,
Keep talking,
Yeah,
Fred.
yeah.
We got a lot of time to waste.
it's 6:30. You won't completely wear your thumbs out in that time, but it'll be close. Because I'm not going to talk that much longer.
Well, you might, because I got a question for you.
Oh, I will avoid it. Trust me, I will avoid it.
What have you heard as far as the new building going out there? What's the status of that? They were going to put up a slab of concrete.
Shape it.
Yeah, because they were going to do the new building, and then they were going to do that slab of concrete over by where the bands play, and they're going
Yeah.
to do something like a lean-to or something over that. Do you know where that? Have they had any talk about what's going on there?
To the best of my knowledge, there hasn't been a building committee meeting for quite some time
Okay.
now.
Okay.
And I don't really, I should be able to remember what happened with that slab, and I don't.
Okay.
I'm drawing a blank on that. I don't think it got done.
Okay. So it's not that we're missing anything. It just may not have. None of that has really.
Move forward.
Yeah.
No.
Exactly.
No.
Okay.
And
Okay.
so, of course, if they had budgeted for that and had money coming in for it and then didn't do it,
Mhm.
that's a few dollars extra that would show up as net income.
Sure.
So-
Gotcha. Okay, cool.
Brett, I had one other thing I wanted to mention, that there's been talk, and I've heard from a number of constituents suggesting we express some interest or get involved a little bit in solar if we can. And so, following up on a program that Organic Valley is involved in, I have a meeting set up on December 10th, not 11th, the 10th.
Okay, I'll get my calendar out again now.
Yeah.
We talked about this earlier today,
Yeah,
and there was a
but,
little confusion about whether it was the 10th or 11th.
Yeah, so, but the guy had an interesting conversation today, and he's sounded anxious to provide us with information, and I'm anxious to see exactly what they have to say.
So keep me up to date on that, and here's why. I called this morning a solar company because we were talking about doing it on our shop roof.
Yeah.
And I talked to a solar company earlier today, and I had asked about as far as prices and stuff, and they said, well, we're kind of getting out of it a little bit. I said, why is that? And they said, well, the Trump administration's tariffs put a number on the cost of solar panels, and they're not cheap anymore. So, unfortunately, you have those guys that are kind of not necessarily going out of business, but significantly reducing their business because of it. So, that is another unintended consequence, or maybe purposely intended based on what the administration's view on solar is, and I don't think it's good. So that's something to look at as far as prices, if we can get into it, if there's still options for reduced prices on panels, what it costs, if it has gone up, what the projections are, and potentially, if the prices are going up because of the tariffs and stuff, looking at maybe postponing that, seeing what happens if those tariffs come off. I know there's trade talks with China and stuff now, possibly being presented. So when you do meet, ask that question as far as
Yeah.
prices, if the prices have gone up, if it is because of the tariffs, there's potential that those prices will go down. But just check into that, because this
Yeah,
solar
that-
company made that
Where
comment.
are you
that-
meeting with, Jack? I didn't catch that. Organic Valley?
Organic Valley in Lafarge.
And do they do solar panel, do
They're,
they?
they're involved with Arcadia and St. Charles are the only two I can remember, but a number of communities at
And do
this
they
point.
install them, or do they, what do they do?
That's what I have to
Oh, we
find
don't
out.
know. Okay.
It's strictly a research meeting to
Okay.
find out how they have evolved. He was interested in what power company is in this area. And so, again, it's simply to get information and see whether it's something we should or could pursue or not, so.
And I think it's the wave of the future that it's gonna get done eventually, just if we can do it now. It would be nice to get ahead of the curve a little bit, you know.
Is this, are you thinking of it for the new highway building, or this building, or?
I'm
Or
thinking
just
about it.
getting information?
Well, I'm thinking about it in the county, where, actually, she's not here this evening, but Betts is the one that's been kind of pressing me on this. And because, as Fred pointed out at the last meeting, small farmers are struggling.
Right.
So if there are some alternatives to planting corn or
Plant a
planting
solar
soybeans, let's explore it. And I mentioned that the lady that had talked to me about it raised sheep, and he said, "Oh, what a good combo." He said, we have sheep that graze in Cashton around the solar panels, so they don't mow it or anything. He said the
Right.
sheep take care of everything, and so he just thought that was interesting. But again, I I am so naive in terms of exactly how this all can fall, come together, that it's fact-finding, so.
We have another resource within the staff. Tess has some contacts in that industry, and so she will be. She's going to set up an appointment with one of the representatives, come talk and provide some information as well. So we'll
Good
try and
stuff.
dovetail the two
I
appointments.
forgot that, thank you.
Well, that's good. So are you gonna put solar in your,
I'd like to, yeah, because I'd like to do all three farms
yeah.
and get eventually, because, like Jack said, and Fred has mentioned too, that, small farms, you gotta start looking at ways to diversify. In with anything, step on the soapbox, with anything, it's not the amount of money you make, it's the amount of money you spend. So if you can reduce some of the money that you're spending, that's the same as getting an increase in pay. So if there's ways that you can decrease your electrical bills, that helps, So, we're looking at it, obviously, down the road it'd be fun to put even more up and do stuff like that. But for right now, just the shop would help out a lot. So we're just kind of doing some fact finding and gathering. And ironically, I happened to call them this morning to get some information. So yeah, I think it's a good thing. It's something we got to look at, and it's potential countywide to have, a county, basically a county solar farm to help, the people of the county reduce some of their electrical, if you could,
Well, our topography doesn't lend itself to the windmills.
Well, so that was
Really,
the other
so-
thing, because we looked at that too at our place.
Yeah.
And the kicker is, even though we live in a valley, but it's open to the west, and you do get predominantly west winds. We don't get enough winds down in the valley, and so it's you're kind of limited,
Yeah.
But
The sun shines
solar
every
for
place,
our
so.
places, but we only get sun at high noon.
I suppose because right,
Yeah.
right.
You're out of luck
We're
on
out
solar
of luck.
panels. You really are.
I know.
Okay. Well, we have 13 minutes until we have a public hearing.
We'll just take a recess.
Yes, we
I
do.
might
You
guess we
wanna
might as
have
well.
the public comment period closed?
Oh, yeah, well, we could just as
If
well.
anybody wants to say
Sure.
anything?
If we want to do ending public comment, we can do that now too. Well, if somebody does it, well, we'll have to cut you off at 6:30, but.
Oh, there you go.
Ted Hanson, Union Township. I see in the Argus here about 3 weeks ago, there was so many, probably a dozen or more, these welfare fraud cases. How are they going about oversight on that, and what is being done to improve that they don't have these cases?
So we had two gentlemen come in that head that up for our area, and that's what they do, is look into the welfare fraud stuff. Unfortunately, it is a problem, and a lot of times it's word of mouth, somebody tipping somebody off that, hey, this person's doing this illegally or wrong. But I guess as far as how do you keep track of it, it's kind of what it's been so far, is having the, is it the Wabasha Police Department that's heading it up? Yeah. Yep.
What, 6 counties?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Wabasha County, yeah, I forget there's a Wabasha city too.
They've been doing it for us for a number of years.
Yes,
Quite a few,
yep.
yes.
And so they're kind of heading it up, trying to stay ahead of it. And part of the theory is that if you know somebody's watching, maybe some people will be less apt to do it when word gets out that, hey, you can get nailed for this. So,
Well, the way they got that system set up now, they got it camouflaged so that you can't even tell if the people are on welfare or whatever. I went to the welfare office and asked them if they had a list of people. Oh, no, we can't give you that. That's just like your bank account. I said, the hell, it's like my bank account. I said, I work for my money. All this welfare and all that should be public information.
well, and I'll add you, since we got some time, I'll add one more to that. you know, I get a lot of people that, you know, as a farmer, there's a lot of people that go around saying, well, you know, the government subsidies for farmers is the same thing as welfare for the farmers. And that's government money, and that list is readily available to the public. And I've heard people say that same comment, that should that be readily available? So I think there's controversy on both sides, because what's personal information and what's not, and you know, that, you know, there's certain lists that are, certain that aren't. So it is an argued deal, but you know, I feel your pain, and I think we all do, and that's why they've got the Wabasha Sheriff's Department's heading that up. So yeah, I appreciate it, Ted. That's it's a big issue.
Yes, it is.
And of course, at this level, we really can't do much about it. We can try within our department. We can try to monitor it, and that's really about all we can do. We can't change the regulation that you were talking about. That's done at a higher level of government than we are.
A lot of them running around town here, they seem like they're just as able-bodied as anybody else, and I'm sure they're drawing welfare benefits.
They all work the second shift, Ted.
They all work the second shift, he says. Is there anything else? We'll recess for 9 minutes then, or probably 8.5 by now. We're back in session. Public hearing on the update to the Botcher Park ordinance and Wildcat Park ordinance.
Do we need a motion to go into this at all? No.
No.
Okay.
Oh, I don't know, do we? It's public hearing, that's different.
Technically, yes, I think so.
Yeah, technically we suspend it to go into the public hearing and then go from the public hearing back to the regular
Yes.
meeting.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah, okay.
Okay. I'll make a motion to go into public hearing.
Second.
Moved and seconded to move to public hearing. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Aye. That's it. There's no, everybody voted for it, so motion carried. Okay, we're in public hearing. Update to Botcher Park ordinance number 9 and Wildcat Park ordinance number 10.
All right, I suggest start with number 9 with Botcher Park and see if anybody else has any comments they wish to make on that. Otherwise, Brian, would you like to summarize the changes, or would you like me to?
Yes.
Bob Botcher Park, by the way.
Well, we shall see.
Yes.
Yes, so summarizing the change to ordinance number 9, which is the Wildcat Park ordinance. There's a few locations throughout the ordinance to change the language from park board to park committee, just because it's the parks committee now instead of the park board. Changing the park operator to park manager, again, just a title change, no real substance there. Within Appendix A has item number 5 has reservations must be received a minimum of 7 days prior to the reservation date. Strike that language, so if there's a site open 3-4 days before you want to camp, there's no reason why you would need to have a reservation 7 days in advance.
Right.
Throughout the
Right.
document,
You talking Botcher or Wildcat?
this is
He's
Wildcat.
talking Wildcat. He's got to be talking
Yeah,
Wildcat.
Wildcat is ordinance number 9, ordinance number 10 is Botcher.
Oh, okay, my
Oh,
mistake.
okay.
Appendix C, there's some different locations that have some language that refers to specific years. Being that it's an ordinance, we're not going to be going and updating the ordinance every year, so you want to strike whatever those years within the ordinance and keep that into separate documents or separate locations. So under policy number 1, Houston County will advertise the availability of camping sites every 4 years. Beginning in 2015, with the lottery that will be held the 3rd week in September. Want to strike out beginning in 2015. It's just going to be held every 4 years. there might be a year that we go and get approval from the Army Corps to delay it a year for whatever reason. So that every 4 years could actually change slightly with approval, and that language is later in the document. And then change the lottery to be held held in September to allow a little bit of flexibility instead of making it during that third week every year. Changing the seasonal site numbering, there's a few additional sites that were added. So there's going to be 26 seasonal sites instead of 20, and that changes. The last number is going to be number 35 instead of 30. Policy number 4, it starts for the year 2012 and 2013 camping season, talks about the electrical rates, the fees for the campground. That's in a different section. So strike everything that talks about the actual fees that cost with using the campground. And then in Appendix D, there was some fees that were listed within the appendix of the ordinance had the 2013 fees for camping. On a different page within the website had the actual fees for the camping that was updated for the 2018 season. So again, we have stuff that's been outdated. So I'm going to update those to the current fees and talk about, should the fees be within this appendix in the document, or should that be eliminated altogether and have that fees list be housed separately within the ordinance. So from what I recall, that is everything as far as the ordinance revisions. So for the most part, is some pretty minor updates, housekeeping issues, nothing that's really changing how the park functions.
Yeah, other than updating some fees on the annual cost, the only change really to the fee structure was putting in a boat launch fee, and we structured it such that it was one, not expensive, and B, very reasonable to do an annual pass instead of individual each time. And so that'll be something we'll look at being able to show and put, provide a simple pass for folks.
Speaking of that, kind of off the subject, but not really, there was talk about that boat launch being fixed. Did that ever get done or gonna get done? Do you know?
Yep, so I've spoken with the DNR a couple times. They were going to go down there and take a look at it. I haven't talked to the person from the DNR that came down and took a look at it. The boat launch on the north end of the park, the main launch site, that was DNR put that in 100% DNR money. The county, we go out there, we pull out the floating debris and logs that get hung up in that area. But for the most part, that's been DNR, Army Corps that needs permission to do anything with it. We haven't, and we're not anticipating doing any changes with that. It's on the main flow, the main channel. No matter what changes get made out there, depending on the current and the water elevation, it really changes how that boat or how the launch works. So DNR has not came back and said that they're going to change anything. They were just going to verify that things were built according to their standards, and it does sound like it was.
Sounds good.
I would just comment, you'd almost have to put a breakwater up there to improve the launch. It's the current's just too swift.
Yeah, and at one time they did have the wing dam right upstream of the launch higher, trying to divert that water away, and then we got a bunch of sediment that came in behind it, filled up that launch with sediment, and then it became no better than what it currently is. So they've made that, increase that level, lowered it down, trying to find that perfect height, and it's just difficult.
Yeah. Okay.
That's it. I will get all the way and see if no one has any public comment.
Suggest open to public comment on the Wildcat Park ordinance then.
Yeah. Is there anyone here who would like to talk about either one of these parks as far as the updates to the ordinances? Okay. So the proposed Botcher Park ordinance changes,
first one is to rename Botcher Park to Bob Botcher Park, in recognition of the person that donated the property to the county. Second item is the table of contents. On the top of that, within the ordinance, says Wildcat Park rules and regulations instead of Botcher Park. So we'd want that changed to Botcher Park or Bob Botcher Park, depending on the outcome of the ordinance revisions. Several locations within the ordinance, if we do change the name of the park, will need to be updated from Botcher to Bob Botcher.
That's 'cause there's a lot of botchers in that area.
Yeah.
Spelled a little differently, but even so, yeah.
Yeah. Section, or chapter 6, section B, hunting, and section C, trapping prohibited. Currently, hunting, trapping, target shooting, all that stuff is allowed in the park during, as long as it's being done legally, if you have the proper license to do that. With the improvements of some trails within that park area and safety and the use of the park, does the county want to use that park more as a hunting ground or as a park that's going to be developed and not fully developed, but developed enough where it has some walking trails throughout it? Boy Scouts have made some the Scouts have made some walking trails throughout that. The Parks Committee is recommending that hunting is no longer allowed within that park. So if that decision gets made to change that, we would have to go and sign the park on the outside signs throughout the entire perimeter of the park. And then we wouldn't allow hunting out there unless authorized by a specific event. Like Olmsted County has some parks that they do not allow hunting during the normal year, but during the hunting season they will take that park and they'll shut it down for a week or two depending on what's going on, and they'll allow people with disabilities or veterans to go out there and hunt in the park in that time. So they'll close the park and then allow other ones to hunt. So
It was just in the Tribune that's occurring for handicap hunting.
yeah, so
Yeah.
so this might be a good place to allow that to occur. So
So the ordinance states no hunting except with special permission, or what's the word?
As of right now, it allows it, correct?
yeah, as of right now, it allows it. So if it gets changed, you could change it to whatever you want. So what the discussion would be to make it, it shall be unlawful when in the park for any person to engage in hunting, trapping, target shooting, or distributing feed or bait, except during specific events authorized by the county board. So that way it would not allow it, except if the board says we're going to allow it. At that point, you officially close the park to keep the public out of it, so they're not in there creating some type of danger or hazard, and then you can allow the hunting in it.
Okay, are you asking, should we be making a motion on that specific one, or would that be part of overall approval of the?
You can make all these at the same time. You can make them individually. You can do
Okay.
some and not others, depending on what you choose.
Okay.
Okay.
The next item then would be in Chapter 8, Sections B and C. There's 3 places where it says Park Board instead of Parks Committee. So that's, again, just a little bit of language updates. And then the final item would be there's a few places that does not allow camping and campfires. So in Chapter 6, Section C, Section 8, and Chapter 4, Section C and H, and then Chapter 6, Section A doesn't allow camping, gathering firewood, having campfires. If we've had some scouts been out there in the park building some of these trails, they made some improvements to the park. Usually when they do this as a project, they try to spend the night camping, have a campfire. Again, since they're doing some work to the benefit of the county, it'd be nice to be able to reward these individuals for their hard work and effort by allowing them to have camp overnight or to have campfires. Again, with the permission of the county, so that way the county gets notified, gets approval, sheriff's office is notified, so that way if they get a call at night saying, someone's camping out at the park, they know what's going on.
Okay.
So those are the revisions. So
And the intent, as Brian said, is to allow the exception, of a scout group once in a while when they're out there, not turn it into a campground by any means. That the intent is still to keep it a natural area.
And they would have to notify the county sheriff department?
The county board would approve that in advance, yes.
Oh, okay, in advance.
See if there's any more public feedback, and otherwise I'd suggest just,
Now, are there any questions or comments about that? Yeah.
Good evening, Bruce Kimiko from Caledonia. So the exemption, the exceptions for camping and campfires are only for the Boy Scouts, or any person or group that wants to avail themselves to the exception?
Right.
Who gets the exception?
there is no, it's not, in the ordinance, it will not be specified a specific group. It won't specify the Boy Scouts specifically. That was the example, based on their past work.
That's only an example.
Right.
Anything else? Yes, ma'am.
So, did I hear correctly that if someone wants to use it for a special event, they would make it, they would get on the agenda with the county commissioners then? Is that the first step, or what is the first step?
I don't even know if that would be the first step. It would be more just with the, well, I guess that would be the question we'd have to clarify. Do you contact?
The administrator in the sheriff's department?
Yeah.
And then they would bring it before the board for approval. I don't know that the specific individuals would come, but the idea would come before the board, like the administrator bring it forward and say this group wants to. I don't know if it would be considered a public, you wouldn't have like a public hearing per scenario,
No.
but you definitely bring that up. You'd say, we had a request that group such and such would like to use Botcher Park for a camping outing on weekend such and such.
Yeah,
And
I would
it come for approval.
I don't think we've put it into specific words in the ordinance, and we may or may not, but what I would suggest is that it would come through the Parks Committee, who the county board has the Parks Committee manage the park, and that would be the source of the request to come through.
We usually have people tell us who they are.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Patty Van Gundy. The Chapel Family Farm borders the Botcher Park.
Oh, okay.
In fact, the Botcher Park was part of my great-grandfather's land, and that's something that is a long story. But anyway, my husband Larry and I just purchased the farm from my dad.
Oh.
So we're neighbors there, and I just want to be updated and know what's going on at the park.
Sure.
And I like the idea that you've come up with. I think that will be a much better fit for the area. And I also was wondering then who the Parks Committee is and what is their role. Would you mind telling me that?
Okay.
Well,
Okay. Go ahead.
I'm on the committee as a board representative.
There's usually two commissioners, but Scott's
Yeah,
not
Scott
with us.
resigned, so we'll be assigning another person at the beginning of the year, and then Jeff is on the committee, and
Brian.
Brian.
Walter and Donna Trigus.
Yeah, so,
Member at large,
Okay.
Donna
Yeah.
Trigus, treasurer.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
And the signs up right now say Botcher Park. All those yellow signs that follow the border around, will they all be changed then to say Bob Botcher Park?
Well, actually, that'll probably be depending on if the ordinance changed, because there'd be something I would have to say. I would assume no hunting or camping on there, so the signs would
Have to
totally
include
have
that
to
as
be, yeah,
well?
right,
Okay.
yeah. I would assume all those would say the same thing on it, all the way around, but.
Okay, well, just if, I'll try to keep in touch, and if anything concerns us as a neighbor, feel free to call us at any time.
sure.
And if you guys ever have any comments, questions, or concerns, you know, always
Right.
let the board know, you know, and
Mhm.
obviously Jeff's gonna be on that, so you can call the administrator and
Okay.
if you have an issue or something, you know.
Okay, all right, sounds good, thank you.
Thank you. No further, whoops.
Anybody else?
Can I have a redo?
Well, I don't know. I suppose, yeah. Little harassment there, but that's okay.
So Bruce Chemical drives by Bob Barcher Park, notices the sign, sees the big rock there that tells me I can't park in the ditch. And I go up to the parking pad and I stand outside my car door and I look for a sign that tells me what I can and cannot do at that park. And I see somebody going up there, traipsing along with a tent and a Primus stove and a backpack and a thermos container and dish soap, or whatever you do when you camp. Will the sign say that certain people can camp, but you need to get permission first? And where do they go? I mean, the signs have to be very specific, because otherwise people will be seeing activities going on, but the sign doesn't say one way or the other what they can and cannot do. I mean, we can't have confusing messages, I guess.
Brian?
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
we don't have the full language in the signage done yet, but what I'm anticipating is that it will say no unauthorized camping or fires, and then to notify the sheriff's office. If there's something, the purpose of the county being notified is that we make sure the sheriff's office is aware of it, so we would expect to get a phone call if someone's out there camping, that someone's gonna be calling and say, you know, have the sheriff's office know it, yes, they're authorized, they're good, so.
I'd sug-
So we're trying to make sure that we are gonna be clear with that, you know, so we don't have a lot of unknowns.
I'd suggest too that somebody kind of monitor where Bruce pulls his car in too, so.
There's 3 of us here.
I'm getting a different car.
Okay. Now, I assume we need to have a couple of motions.
Do that in
Yeah, I would suggest.
Yeah, that's right, that's right. We're in public hearing. We've got to go out of public hearing back into open session.
So
Sorry.
move back into open session.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded to go back to open session. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're back in open session. Now, we can do the motion business and see if we have any further discussion here. And go ahead.
Should we do, I suppose, each ordinance separately?
Yeah.
So I would make a motion to approve the updates, changes to Bob Botcher Park ordinance 10, correct?
Yep.
I'll second it.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, motion carried. And we move on to number 9.
I would make a motion to approve the updates and changes to ordinance number 9 for Wildcat Park.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? That's it. Motion carried. And nothing remains on the agenda except
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
moved and seconded adjournment. All those in favor, aye. Aye.
Aye.
Nobody's opposed. We're adjourned.